When you load up your Sega Genesis game, most Sega logos look like that, but sometimes it looks like that. I'm sure you've heard this one before. Sega. What is it? Hold on. G-E. There's a G and an E in the Sega logo. What? Did anybody else come to this revelation? It means nothing about anything. It'd be funny if the letters actually did the song. Oh, it doesn't work that way. Oh well. I digress. Anyway, what I'm getting at is it can look like this, or that one's cool. A lot of them are just kind of a default generic. Several of them have the same one, but there are so many of them, like over 50, that have very unique ones. And some of them unique to the game itself, which I think is super cool. If this was Nintendo, I promise you Nintendo would have one generic thing that would happen in front of every game that you couldn't touch. Unless the game was made by Nintendo, then I'm sure they would do whatever they wanted. But Sega is just like, you know what, have some fun with it. And there's a lot of great ones, a lot of really memorable ones. In this video, ranking my favorite 20 of them from 20 all the way down to number 1. All the way up to number 1? No, I guess all the way down to number 1. And if you want to do a video like this for yourself, I uploaded a video that had every Sega logo from literally every Sega game. Now again, not every Sega game, there's like 700 games, but not all of them feature that Sega logo. Sometimes like a game from EA or Tengen, I think a few times too, just didn't have the logo, which is totally fine. But any game that had that Sega logo, again, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them look the same. But if you want to use that video, go for it. It's also on this channel. Starting off with number 20, it's this one. Yeah, good old Garfield. Admittedly, I was never the biggest Garfield fan. I read it like everyone else. It seemed like more people were more gung-ho about it. I'm probably the only person on this planet. Anyway, just something like that, just something nice and simple. It's like, here's the Sega logo, but then here's Garfield, so you know you're playing the right game. And you'll see that a few times on this list, I'm sure. Next up is this one. Cool spot, cool game, decent game, but just something as simple as, here's the Sega logo, but there's something a little weird about it. And then you notice the cool spot character kind of jumping up in the background. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Next may be one that you've never seen. I don't know. It just brings a smile to my face. World Cup USA 94 is where this one comes from. You know, sometimes as soon as you see the Sega logo, you hit the start button because you want to get to the gameplay quicker. But when I noticed that the color was a little bit different, I was like, okay, this is something new. And then immediately you get the payoff with the soccer ball coming in, or football if you're from that region. This one a little further down on the list, but it's still definitely a memorable impact here. Check this out. There you go. Hoi. This one comes from Brutality of Fury. Not the best fighting game in the world, but one of the best Sega, introduction logos of the world. They put a lot of time and effort into this. They could have just used a generic thing, just like Sega logo, right into the game, but they went that extra mile to create this whole new cinematic, this animatic of this, It's pretty cool. Props to them. Another quick and easy.
Where you going?
There's a few of the football ones that are kind of like this. There's one of them where they just go over and they start cheering and stuff like that. But this one, I don't know. This one, again, just kind of brought a smile to my face. It was very predictable what was going to happen, but it was still kind of fun. Legendary, this one. Mickey Mania. Did you guess that it was from Mickey Mania? It is. And something whimsical about that Disney idea of the drawing of the thing, and of course, the pen comes down and draws the Sega logo. And very on brand for what Mickey Mania, the video game, was going to be all about too. So it's kind of fun to incorporate the game itself into just that little logo at the very beginning of the game. You probably know this one. Jam and Earl, that's right. Jam and Earl, yeah, fun. It's it has a little bit of the beat in the background and everything, and then it could have crashed into the thing, or just could have just a simple swoop out of the way. I don't know. Brings a smile to my face. Not sure it could be a top anything list without this one.
Test 1, 2. Sega.
At first I was like, oh, it's weird that it's like in black and white, but it makes sense because it's Comic Zone. It's Comic Zone. So of course it's like sketched. And they could have even taken it further and like literally sketched the logo, whatever, but it stands out for sure. Another great. Tasmania, you ever play this one? Completely different than the Super Nintendo game. Tasmania on the Genesis, I think it's a better game. It's a platformer. But just these, here's the Sega logo, and then here comes Taz, and then naturally, Taz would eat one of the letters. It's great. Another one you may never have seen, but definitely one of the best. It's quirky. Yeah, it's great. Pele 2 is this one. You can find this one on Pele 2 World Championship, World Tournament. Yeah, Pele 2 World Tournament. It's just... what can you say? Sometimes there would be a game that you knew would have something fun with that Sega logo. You wouldn't anticipate it, but you would just know. Like, you know, you'd see a new game come out, let's say, for instance, and you'd be like, oh, cool, this is going to be a cool game. And usually the first thing on your mind is not, ooh, I wonder what they're going to do with the Sega logo. But every once in a while, you know something like that will happen, or as soon as you see it, you'll be like, well, of course they do something like that. Why wouldn't they? And this is one of those examples. Eternal Champions. Love me some Eternal Champions. Another fun one here. Marth Lami. I'm not as familiar with the game. I know I've played it a couple of times, but I remember the cartoon being a thing. I didn't really watch it though. But I remember the commercials for sure. And with the game and with the Sega logo, it's fun. This one you may never see if you hit the start button too quick. Check this one out. Now that zipper segue happens throughout the game as well when you play this game. The game's called Devilish. It's like a breakout style game in a way. It's the best way I can describe it. You know, the ball comes down, you have to shatter the things and move. You know, it's like breakout or Arcadoid or whatever. But that little zipper effect is the segue between levels and whatever. And they added it at the beginning of the game with something like this. So it's just like, you know, again, it's one of those that, you know, maybe you wouldn't notice, but as soon as you see it, you're like, oh, that's fun. That's kind of fun, you know, sure. It's actually great. It's a great game, too. We'll talk about that in another video. Another fun one here. Yeah, I got Roadrunner. Love me the Roadrunner one, and again, it could be a little bit predictable, but it's just like, it's fun. It's, you know, it's a good way to incorporate, hey, we haven't even played the game yet, and we're already introducing the characters so you know you are in the right place. And speaking of knowing you're in the right place when you pop in a game, this one is probably the best example of that. I mean, you can't have a Star Trek game without having teleporters and all that. That classic sound effect, that kind of classic effect. It's a very classic effect. It's a decent game too, but it was fun to see that as the way to introduce the Sega logo. It just kind of pops in, pops right back out. Cool, done. Definitely one of the best here. Oh my goodness. I spent a lot of time watching Beavis and Budhead in the 90s, that's for sure. You get a bit of the comedy, you get a bit of the giggle. You know, you get it all just in that first couple of seconds of the game, and then it goes on to be a very good game itself, too. What could be probably #1 on most people's lists for best Sega logo of all time, it's this one right here. And they had a few Jurassic Park games. The first one and the third one. Would you call the third one the Rampage Edition? Would you call that the third one? I don't know. Anyway, so this is the one I like the most. They have a couple of these on the Genesis, so I think I'll do this one. Earthworm Jim, the first one. Earthworm Jim 2 is also great. Well, here's the Earthworm Jim 2 as well. But I think just the first one was good enough. Like the second one, it's fine, but it also takes a little bit too long, where you would see it once and you're like, okay, I'm done. And you just hit start and move on with the game. But the first one, nice and quick. It shows you the kind of comedy and the sense of humor that Earthworm Jim has. So it worked out great. And both of them are great too. But just I think I prefer the first one more. An absolute classic. I mean, live gunfire in the beginning of any game is always good news for anyone, especially on the Sega Genesis. But Aladdin is such a great game anyway, and again, you get that comedy, you get that humor, you get that kind of, not just the welcoming of characters, but you also get the great animation that the game came with too. Like when you see that, you're like, oh, that actually looked really cool. And you see the feathers falling and stuff like that. You're like, oh, okay, if this is just the title screen, that's not even, it's before the title screen. If this is what we're getting just on the Sega logo, then the rest of the game is going to be amazing, which it was. Oh my God, this one. I was like, as soon as I saw this one, I was like, yep, whoever made this game did their homework. They did their research. Now with Ren and Stimpy, I mean, the game itself, not the greatest. It was okay. It was okay. But I loved it when they would do things like this, and you knew that they did their research. Again, I'm coming from the days where all of the WWF wrestling games were, I think, made by people who never watched wrestling in their life. They saw some photos, and they watched a match or two, and so the games themselves weren't quite wrestling games. But then with something like this, you're like, okay, just like same with Beavis and Budhead. You're like, okay, whoever did this, they must be fans of the show, and we got a great Sega logo with the Ren and Stimpy game. And the Ren and Stimpy one is my favorite one.